am Dr. Daniel Weiser, and I'm here to talk about my philosophies and thoughts on piano playing. Yeah, I had sort of an odd experience in that I started when I was 5 years old and was able to, I had an older brother and sister, and sort of sat down at the piano and began to play their music without any lessons. So I was wired properly to be able to play, and was fortunate to live in Boston at the time and took lessons at the New England Conservatory prep department with a wonderful Russian teacher by the name of Edwin Heimovitz. And was there for about 4 years and was wonderful, but my parents ended up moving to Buffalo, New York when I was 10 or 11. And unfortunately, at that point, I was unable to find a teacher that I really clicked with. And as a 13-year-old boy, I guess at the time, I was also sort of being pushed in other directions, and I actually ended up quitting piano for several years. And I would always play on my own, but I didn't take lessons basically through my high school years, which was an odd thing to do. I did go to chamber music camp and a place called Apple Hill for all those years actually, so I was able to still play, and I didn't like playing by myself, but I love the idea of playing with other people, which is really what I mostly do now. So that kept me going, and it was only after I got to college, and I went to college to do American history. I wasn't interested in music at all at the time, but I found out I could take piano lessons for credit, and I needed some credit hours, and so I started playing piano again, and I realized that I actually liked it for my own sake, and began to think seriously about maybe going into it, but then decided that I didn't want to be a starving musician and ended up going to Harvard Law School instead for a year. But while I was at law school, I realized that I was pretty miserable, was going to be a miserable lawyer, and I formed a piano trio with 2 other miserable law school students. And it was at that point that I said, well, maybe I should try to go into music, and I was fortunate to be able to get into Peabody Conservatory at that time to do a master's program and then my doctorate in piano. So it's been a long journey, not the usual route, but one that has helped me in, I think, my philosophy, because I'm not one that believes in practicing for 4 or 5 hours a day as the ticket to success, but rather sort of fine-tuning what you can do within an hour or 2 if you want, if that's the most. Reading books, looking at paintings, trying to find other ways to inspire yourself musically, because the best pianists, I think, are those who sort of know a little bit about outside of music and can show that in the way they play. And so in that tradition, I think I follow in what Chopin and others said, that basically said you don't need to just work yourself to death on your fingers and technique. That's an important part, but that technique is just a way to get towards a beautiful interpretation, which is what I'm after. I have been teaching now, I guess I got my doctorate from Peabody, I guess in 1997 or 98 now. I had moved up to Vermont in 95 or 96, and began teaching early on, probably right in 98, 99, so it's been, however, that almost 20 years of teaching, and was able to have students of all ages, from age 5 up to age 80, and really enjoyed the variety of levels and ages. And of course, you find quickly as a teacher that there is now one-size-fits-all way to teach, that every student comes at it with a slightly different talent level, a slightly different desire to learn, and a slightly different pace that you have to go. And my goal has always been, A, to make sure that whoever's playing the piano enjoys what they're doing, because we can't get anywhere if they're not enjoying it. And B, to try to give them as much outside information as I can to make the piece interesting that they're working on without overdoing it. But I'm very much into students understanding a little bit about the scales and the chords they're playing that can make reading music a lot easier. I'm a very good sight reader, and I've always been, and I find it very difficult sometimes when I first started to work with people who couldn't read the music instantly, because I didn't even know what that meant. To me, it was always there. And as I found that a lot of people, when they learn to read, the best way is to sort of adapt a little theory in there, give them some sense of where it's going, because then the piece, you sort of can guess where the piece is going to go next, and you can read in your head where it's going to go. And so I've discovered that many people will learn that way faster, and I try to give them that. I also try to give them a little history, because I was a history major, and I think every composer has a certain way that it looks on the paper, a certain way that it meant to be played, and if you don't know a little bit about the background of that time period, what they're doing, it makes you play in an unstylistic way. And so I'm always trying to get people to understand what it is to play Beethoven, what it is to play Chopin, what it is to play Bach. They're all slightly different touches that you might try, and it's always an exciting thing when the way you play the piano matches the style of the piece that you're playing, which will vary with whatever you're playing. Yeah, I am a romantic at heart, and so I tend to gravitate towards the 19th century composers, Chopin, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and Brahms. Those were sort of that full-blooded emotionalism, which I think I play with when I do that. That is not to say that I don't. I think in my older age, I've begun to appreciate Bach more than I did when I was younger, where it was a little bit of torture for me, and I understand that sometimes it is torture for young students, but there is something beautiful about it as a great mathematical puzzle, and there is a certain way of playing that can calm you down for other types of styling. The same with Mozart, that really is a crystal playing that comes in handy even when playing the deep romantic stuff. I still struggle with a lot of 20th century music, but I get more and more when I can find something with a good tune in it, that's good. Obviously, the rhythmic aspect of 20th century music is exciting, and I'm very much into sort of exploring rhythm. For me, the notes in a piece only take about 10% of the piece. There's so much more that goes on, and I encourage my students not to worry about missing a note. You can play the entire piece with the wrong notes, but if you play without passion, I don't want to hear it about it, something like that. Mm-hmm. So obviously we try to aim for many notes, and the other famous quote by Rubinstein, if he could play a concert with all the notes that he left on the floor that he missed, he could do concerts all over. So for me, it's really about the passion you put into it. It's about the space between the notes, what you do from leading from one note to the next, that sometimes is just silence, and really getting a precise rhythm and a precise articulation to the phrases that you want. So there's a lot more than notes when I work with people. I have a wonderful wife who is a doctor at GBMC, and the reason why we moved back to Baltimore after I had been away for many years after I graduated Peabody. We have two twin 9-year-old girls who are in 3rd grade now at the Bryn Mawr School, and both are fairly musical, play piano, sing, play double bass, but also are involved in ballet and acting and all sorts of other activities. I myself love to play bridge. I'm a sort of active bridge player, which I do at different clubs in the area when I can.